Welcome back, and thank you for being such a good audience to grab a drink and come back as disciplined a way as you have. I think we deserve a clap for all of you. I spoke of one set of attitudes that divides the world, the idea of having two camps. But there is a common attitude that binds both those camps. And we're increasingly beginning to live in a bush-like world, which is if you're not with us, then you're against us. And if you're against us, then we will bomb you, literally or metaphorically. And that is the kind of society we've become. The other, of course, is that there is a great impulse in society to draw everybody to the center, a kind of sameness, a desire to roll out the sausage factory, to deny our individuality. And then I suppose that's been an impulse through the ages. And through the ages, there have been a few who withstand that impulse, who are constantly pushing at the boundaries of what it is to be human, constantly pushing at the boundaries of how to interpret our realities. And while there are millions who operate at the center, there are very few who dare to push at the boundaries. And if we lose those few, we actually lose the very idea of human possibility. It's very easy to say that somebody is a counterculture figure or a countercurrent. Just stop again for a moment and think what it is to run against the current, to swim against the current. There are huge costs to pay of mental well-being, financial well-being, of sometimes existential well-being. And today we have somebody who has paid all those costs. He has paid those costs and he has stood his ground. He's a director in a medium that speaks to 1.3 billion people and yet occupies the center in the most fundamental way possible, is against experimentation, is against doing anything that the market doesn't want. But this man has stood against the market, believed in himself, stands for courage, integrity, and individuality. You know his greatest films, The Gangs of Wasipur, Devdi, but what is much more fascinating about this man is that he has oeuvres of work that we haven't discovered, because society, governments, we ourselves are ranged against him. Ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to welcome Anurag Kashyap.
तौबा तेरा जलवा तौबा तेरा प्यार तेरा इमोशनल अत्याचार
यहाँ से पूरे यहाँ कबूतर भी एक पंख से उड़ता है और दूसरे से अपना इज्जत बचाता है
तौबा तेरा प्यार तेरा इमोशनल अत्याचार
जाओ जाओ दिल पर जाओ जाओ दिल पर दिल पर
हो गई दिल के पार ट्रेजेडी ट्रेजेडी लुट गई रे बाहर गुल सूख सूख मुरझाए हो गई दिल के पार ट्रेजेडी ट्रेजेडी लुट गई रे बाहर गुल सूख सूख मुरझाए बोल बोल भाई डिड यू डिच मी जिंदगी भी ले ले यार किल मी बोल बोल भाई डिड यू डिच मी होर बोल बोल भाई डिड यू डिच मी जिंदगी भी ले ले यार किल मी जाओ बिया जाओ बिया जाओ बिया तौबा तेरा जलवा तौबा तेरा प्यार तेरा इमोशनल अत्याचार
So that was to give you a little flavor of the world that Anurag occupies. And it is not a pretty one, but it is a real one. Anurag, as I said, you really determinedly fought against the current pretty much all your life. Your landscape is, usually, and we ourselves have called you a raider of the dark, but it's not so much about the dark as the reality, the gritty underbelly, not just of our society, but of us as human beings. And that really is your landscape. And knowing you a little bit, also looking at your work, there are two impulses that seem to drive, your work. And one is a kind of personal impulse, and the other is of how you read society. So I'd really like to start with the personal first, Anurag. If you could share with us, and some of this is difficult for Anurag to speak about, but he always speaks of it very courageously. So Anurag, you've said that you never intended to be a filmmaker, and yet it finally became almost a kind of release for you to express what you've been through in your life. So what is that well of darkness that you draw from? Can you talk about, say, what happened to you in your childhood?
Uh,
Let's start from there.
no, there's a lot of things in the sense. I grew up in a very small town. So growing up with a father who's an engineer, like everything that you saw in Wasepur, the place where Richa Chadda gives birth to the child is the house I grew up in. And that whole colony is where we grew up in. It was called it's a Tashkent colony in a place called Obra far away. So for me, it's like, that was my world. And there's nothing in the sense we used to watch movies on a wall on weekends. And there was this whole ritual. I was around 6 years old. And there was this neighbor of mine. And there was this one cricket stadium. That was the time when all smaller towns had one stadium and they had one Chalchitra theatre in UP. And neighbor of mine would like take me on a cycle on a stadium, and I would not understand anything. And I think some kind of a thing that started then, which much later in my life, I understood that was the kind of sexual abuse, which confused me. And I was too young. I was 6 years old. So for me, it all started from there. And a lot of things that you could not talk about because the world was very different then. Those are not the things you talked about, and you were ashamed, and you could not say. And every time you brought it up, the parents probably did not have the courage to confront the neighbors about their son who was doing this to me. And they had a relationship, and the man was the boss of my father. So, those things we didn't talk about in that time. So a lot of things stayed inside me. Then it was again discovering comic books and reading comic books and hiding it all the time. And like, everything was hidden and protected. And the world was like pretty much under the mattress or within the closed door. And there's nothing that you talked about.
In fact, Anurag, a big strand in your films is the exploration of sexuality and how complex sexuality is, how many facets it has. Before we move away to exploration of your work, if you could really just finish sharing the story that when you went to school, two fault lines in Anurag's life, which I think has really influenced his work. One, he's just about begun to speak of this sexual abuse that started at the age of 6, but also something that we take for granted, which is language. And that, Anurag, if you could talk about what it felt like to be in a public school without knowing English.
So, see, it was like that. There's a lot of things that I was going through my childhood, and what happened was my father had a transferable job. And I remember, and my first memory of, very strong memory is, in his job, he would shave every day. When he had suddenly had stubbles, and he was unshaven, and he had not slept, and his eyes were red. And I remember, I have a very strong memory of that. And today I can go back and I realize it was the time of the emergency. But I remember my name used to be Rinku Singh, and suddenly one day I was told my name is Anurag Kashyap, and I can't tell anyone my name is Rinku Singh anymore. And that was after 6-7 years living with a name called Rinku Singh, and suddenly I became Anurag Kashyap. My name was changed. We were not supposed to be Thakurs, or we are not supposed to be Rajputs anymore. My brother still retains Singh in his name, but I don't. So, those things happened to me, and then nobody understood why I would behave in a certain way. I was very edgy and angry kid because I did not know how to deal with it. So my father would get transferred, but the abuse would continue because it's just the person would change. So, after a while when it happens the second time and third time, you start thinking the problem is with you and not with somebody else. You start feeling that I must be doing something that these people feel that they can do this to me. So, and my parents did not know how to deal with me. My only solace was my cousin, elder cousin, who was my father's elder brother's daughter. My father's elder brother lost his wife and got married the second time, couldn't deal with family and disappeared. So my cousin was his first wife's daughter who was living with us. And she was 17 or something, and they got her married. When they got her married, I went kind of a bit crazy. Listen, I would not listen to anyone because she was my only solace. So I was put in a boarding school. So when I went into a boarding school, nothing stopped. So when you go into a boarding school and you realize things don't stop, and you start believing everything. And then I was very complex by being from this small town, Banaras, who spoke only Hindi in a very English-speaking elite school. So that complex kind of pushed me into the library. In the sense I would hide from everyone. And I spent most of my time in the library. I would spend most of the time hiding away from everyone or in the sick room. And that's somewhere kind of it shaped me up in life. But my biggest problem was, why is it that I would bring up any issue that I'm actually going through and nobody would talk about it? Not one person, from your school teacher to your housemaster to your principal, to no one wants to talk about abuse. No one, abuse is a word probably I learned much later. In the sense I did not know it was abuse. I just did not like it, you know. But nobody would talk about things like that. Nobody would talk about sexuality. We are confused about sexuality. I remember the first time when the kids in my class would teach me, like, have you ever masturbated? It was such a big thing. Like, have you ever masturbated? And I was like, no, what is it? And they would tell you how to do it. And I would not understand it. And you would go through the whole thing and you had orgasm and everything, and you still feel like this is not the right way of doing it. You know, there's strange things that we grapple with, we deal with. And nobody would talk about it. You talk about it to anyone, nahi hota tha.
So Anurag, in fact, when as you just said, when you went to Sindhya, the abuse continued. And Anurag, like you said, that because of the exploration of sexuality and your hard-eyed, cold-eyed, addressing it frontally, could you share with the audience the kind of very important incident that happened to you when you went through that kind of victimization and you wanted to become the oppressor yourself, and how did you get
No,
stopped?
there's this incident. I was a senior finally in school. I was a junior all my life, and people. There was a time when I was a senior, and I had always had this anger. And there was this little boy in the class, and I was like, I would do to him what everybody did to me. It came that point in the sense, and I would take that kid aside and I would slap him around, and then he would become vulnerable, and then I would like hug him, and I would also cry with him, and I'd say, I understand, and I love you. All those kind of things would happen. But unlike me, when this kid was so confused with what I was doing to him, in 1 or 2 months, he wrote a letter to his parents. His parents came all the way to school and they stood outside my house and saying, where's that guy and what do you do to my son and things. And they stood up for him and they fought, and I was ashamed of myself. I was so ashamed. And I was coming out of a point of anger. I was coming out of a point of everything. But at that time, I did not understand those things. And and I was pulled up in front of the principal and said, what do you mean? I said, no, I love the boy. And I says, I know, I understand your love, the kind of love that you probably do in a hidden room or something like that. And I did not know what to say or what to look. For me, it was something that was natural at that time. At that age, nobody was ready to explain things to me. I grew up with it. So it's like I was going through it and thought, maybe now I have come to the point where I can do this to other people. Right? And nobody would talk to me about it. And at that point, I realized that those parents who stood up for the kid, and they looked into my eye and they pointed fingers at me, and that principal who stood there, and everybody talked about it. And that is when I think it hit me. That is when I started thinking, and I almost became, in the sense, if that child's parents were not brave enough to stand up to it and come and confront me, I probably, today I don't know what person I would have been. Sometimes you think that those kind of things we don't talk about, and we brush it every day. Everybody says, why do you have to make this film? Like when I was making Yellow Boots, I really needed to make this film. More than I wanted to make this film, I needed to make this film. I needed to get this film out of my system, and I had a 9-film deal with UTV. I had the whole world wanting to make a film post Devdi, and I said, I want to make Yellow Boots, and nobody wants to make Yellow Boots. And what kind of this film is this, where this girl who gives hand jobs in a massage parlor, and she's trying to find her father. Her father turns out to be one of her clients who's aware of it. The world didn't want to deal with something like that. And I had to make this film. So I went out on a spree 1 year making ad films and commercials and raised my own money, made my own money to make that film and put it out there. Because had I not put that film out there, I don't think I would have moved on. So, but you know, it is just that thing that made everyone so uncomfortable. A lot of people wrote reviews of the film saying, what kind of a film is this? The girl ends up giving handjobs to her father. You know, that's all they got from the film, nothing else. So, you know, that's the world we live in. And at one point you start thinking like, I don't care. I want to put this out there and I want to make people feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry that we've grown up with a feeling that you feel that anything that makes you feel uncomfortable must be bad and so must not be done. But that is very important. Anything that makes us feel uncomfortable makes us think, makes us feel. Sometimes it makes us feel like shit about ourselves. But it's very important. It's very important to make people feel uncomfortable because truth is uncomfortable. And that's probably why I started putting it out there.
So, you know, and again, I'd just like to share with you that Anurag speaking up about this has actually opened up space for so many others. One, to speak about abuse, and then again, of course, parental, you know, neglect of addressing these things, of just wanting to look away. You know, it's been a huge thing. Like in his work, in his personal space as well, Anurag has really always chosen to speak up. Anurag, before we move away to you know, your interpretation of society and what in society drives this kind of black vision that you have, I'd just like you to share with the audience some of what it has meant for you to make different kind of cinema. Today, you're a celebrated name. In a couple of days, you're going to hear about some big accolades that Anurag has just received. Unfortunately, it's not official, so we can't share it. But remember, you were here 2 days, you know, 2 days
And also
later, remember
Nawaz.
you were here, and Nawaz. But that's the kind of praise you're getting now, Anurag. Can you talk of the first 7-10 years of your life when you were trying to, and why were you trying to make that kind of cinema?
I don't know. A lot of people ask me that thing, but you know, it's like I don't know the other way. So it's like, you know, it comes as naturally to me in the sense I don't think I can do the other kind of cinema that I don't make. I can watch it. I love watching mainstream films. I can't make them. I just cannot make them. So, so there is, I think it's a very organic thing. So there's nothing that I force. But I genuinely, and all these films come from somewhere within you. For me, I enjoy music, I enjoy songs, I enjoy humor, but I also enjoy talking about things that nobody would talk about. I think today, in this day and age of social network, I think, like, you know, say Twitter and Facebook and everything, I think, has bypassed that age where it empowered people. Now everybody's figured it out. Now it's used by all kinds of people. I'm saying the first 2 years of Twitter were great. You had a voice, and you could raise a voice, and you could say something. But now Twitter is being used, and everybody else has understood that you raised a voice against. So they are more empowered and they're more powerful to handle things like that. You know, they know how to use Twitter more than we do, and they just know how to shut you down. So I'm saying the things that come out in the sense, everything comes out of some kind of a reaction. My first 7 years were nothing. When I made, say, Panch, I made it because I wanted to make Panch.
Anurag, before we get into your motivation, you know, most people here would not have seen either Black Friday or Panch or Gulal or indeed No Smoking. These are some of the really seminal films that Anurag made, and cinema is such a public, collaborative, time-consuming action. And yet he kept writing this, making the films, and then coming up against the censor board, and they would not get released. And Anurag, can you share that? One, quickly, what are these films about? What were you commenting on society?
When I made Panch, I started writing Panch. It was supposed to be a script called Mirage. It was a script about these 4, 5. Yeah, there was a band called Greek that I was very inspired by. Also, I had this massive crush on this woman who was part of the Greek band. So I wanted to make a film where I was trying to, like, you know, also portray her in the film. So anyway, so
That's honesty. Here I thought you had very deep reasons
no, but
for doing
my
this.
thing was also about the angst, in the sense, you know, there's no such thing as Hindi rock at that time. And I was very affected by rock music because rock music, in a way, spoke a lot of things that I, as a teenager in college, I felt angsty about. And I had no idea that that could also be expressed in form of a song. Because growing up in India, you realize all songs are about self-pity. India is the largest producer of songs of self-pity. You know, we celebrate self-pity like nothing else. That's one of the reasons I hate Devdas, and I wanted to make Devdi to kill it. So, yeah. But when I first time heard Morrison, now first time heard metal, and I was like, you know what, I need to make a film about Hindi rock. There's no such thing as Hindi rock. So when I started making Panch, it started with Vishal Bhardwaj attempting to compose rock music. So the first version of My Khuda was written by Abbas Darwala in English. And then we translated it in Hindi. So, we started the film with like that. And I wanted to make Panch because I wanted to put it out there. And I realized at a point, because the Hindi rock doesn't exist, my script did not progress beyond the first half. In the second half, I found the Jakkal story. And what fascinated me about Jakkal's story was Jakkal, who was hanged to death. And the first film that was made on his life in Marathi launched Nana Patekar in Marathi. He was a photographer. He was a very good photographer. He was a university topper in Pune. And the man chose a life of crime. He wanted a high life. He wanted a good life. And he saw these rich kids and he wanted that. And he was like, I'm a better photographer. I'm a better mind. I top the university. I have everything. But why can't I have what they have? And he chose a life of crime. And Jakkal was subsequently arrested after that whole murder case and Joshi Abhyankar murder case and everything. And he was put behind bars, and his 4 friends who were with him were put behind bars. And he wrote a biography, and his view of crime, which was banned. He wrote it in Marathi. I got a translation of it. And he was hung to death. So when I was researching those things and I got that story, and that kind of fit in with my story of this band. So Panch, the second half became that. About the boys who have point of view, and they wanted to put things out there. So when I made that film, it came out of an angst of why don't we do something like that? It came out of an angst where the whole Hindi film industry was about stars. I said, we'll work with every newcomer. Every single person involved with Panch was a newcomer. So we'll make a film with newcomers and we'll change the system. We'll show the industry that you don't need to depend on a certain way of working. And the film got banned.
In fact, Anurag must be the only filmmaker that's been told by the Censor Board that his very themes are not kosher for this society. Sexuality, drugs, and now he's been trying to make a film about a relationship between a teacher and a student. And I don't know how
it's already made with Nawazuddin. It's called Haramkhor. It's made by a different director. I produced the film. But, it's like after the whole Udta Punjab thing, what happened was, all our films have been rejected by the Censor Board for certifying for television. And the reason given is they're thematically not suitable for television. So not just that, and those include Udta Punjab, that includes Raman Raghav, that includes Haramkhor, that includes all the films. It's just that.
Thematically, Anurag is a misfit for our times. But Anurag, will you, share a bit about and that actually is a reflection on our society as well, that we allow a censor board to define what we as adults are capable of viewing or not. But, I don't know how many people saw what that cost you, those 7 years. Could you talk about the kind of emotional meltdown that this desire to make the kind of cinema you want to make, how costly was it for you?
It was costly in the sense, in a very subverted way, I put all of that in No Smoking. No Smoking was all about those 7 years.
Which you haven't seen, because we haven't seen it. The
Nobody's
Censor
seen
Board
that.
doesn't allow us to see it.
And No Smoking is allowed, but nobody's seen the film. But anyway, the ironical thing about No Smoking was such a pro-smoking movie. And it was such a pro-smoking movie, but based on just the credit of the movie, the health ministry gave me an award. So anyway, forget that. So, it's like, I made Panch, and we went, my first film in a Censor Board, and I was very happy. And I always walk around with my backpack. And I walked it to the censor screening. And I was 27, 28 years old. And with the backpack, I walked in. I was so happy and I was jumpy. And the censor board guy probably thought that, oh, some privileged kid who's got money, for his father's money to make a film. And he saw the film and he says, why have you made what does cinema mean to you? I remember his first question was, what does cinema mean to you? I said, it means a lot of things to me. What does it mean to you? And that person who was a school teacher, he said, cinema means healthy entertainment. Your film is neither healthy nor entertaining. So, and I do not know what to say to that. And then he says, you know, your film has a lot of problems. We can't clear the film. I said, what is the problem? He says, Indians don't masturbate. Your film has a masturbating shot. So for me, a lot of things started there. I said, but you know, it's not even a shot. It's like just a guy under a bed sheet. And there's a whole bed sheet. With his knees, it's not even like his hands are like hitting the bed sheet. You know? But he understood. I said, but you know, so there's nothing I have shown in the film. But he said, no, Indians don't masturbate. And it went on. And that film got stuck for some time. And everybody started questioning me. So when the first screening I kept, for a lot of people from the industry and some senior critics, and I won't name them here, because they came out of the film and they all looked at me. Said, I'm very scared. I will be scared of my watchman. I'll be scared of my liftman. Said, why would you make a film like this? I said, but what have I done? And I realized that nobody does those things. It was not that something I'd done. It's just they don't see beyond the cinema that's available to all of us. And that's why they judge us. And then Black Friday happened. And Black Friday, I had no perspective on the story of the 93 bomb blast. Because the newspaper was obsessed with Sanjay Dutt. They would only talk about what's going on with Sanjay Dutt. We knew there were so many blasts in Bombay, and there's Sanjay Dutt, and this and that, and we had no perspective. So when Hussain Zaidi's unabridged book came to me, the film was not based on the released version. It was the unabridged version that I got 2 years before it came out. So I finally got a perspective and I said, this is a story I need to tell. But I was hired to do a 6 or 8 episode television series for Aaj Tak. Aaj Tak was a new channel coming out then. And they said, there's a new channel coming out and we want to make a 8-part series on it. And I started reading and writing and I said, you know, we can make a whole film out of it. So they believed me and they wanted me to make a film. In my innocence, I decided I'll shoot everything exactly the way it's described in the book because I have to begin from believing something, right? So I believed the book. There's also a lot of things that were not available. The lawyer Sebastian, he wrote a book called Voices. He collected a lot of testimonies and put out a book called Voices. I read Voices, which was supposed to be illegal and you're not supposed to read it. I put all of that in Bombay Velvet. In Black Friday, Bombay Velvet.
Bombay Velvet is a taboo topic. We won't touch it.
Okay, so I put all of that in Black Friday. The prison scene was not in the book. It was in Voices, where the thing is. So when I put out the film and it went there, and actually censors cleared it. Irony was that just Sebastian, the lawyer Sebastian, he wanted the film to be blocked because the case was the case was sub judice. And that's fine, you know, we fought for it. But, you know, slowly in the process of fighting, and I started realizing that you can't say everything you want to say. The big realization for me was, you feel something doesn't mean that you can say it. And that for me was a big realization. Because all my life I believed, no, you can say things. You feel something, you can say things. That was also the same time in Dil Se, there's a very innocent dialogue about कि शाहरुख खान says अगर वो XYZ है तो मैं अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी हूँ. On that one dialogue, Dil Se was pulled up at the same time. And saying something. And suddenly you realize, in the films you can't mention politicians' name. That is when I realized why Indian films, our characters don't have surnames. We can't put out things there. Everything can offend people. Why we don't make political films? Why our films I can't do a simple sequence of 2 guys sitting in a cafe talking about Modi versus anti-Modi. I can't do any of those things in our films, which we can do in films across the world, but not in India. And suddenly, and that is when it slowly started dawning upon me that somewhere we get used as everything else. But we are not allowed to do or say or things by constitution, by law, because it's all restricts us. Like even Udta Punjab got cleared by the court, but we had to delete one scene. it was not completely cleared. It was not cleared 100%. That one scene of pissing on the crowd had to be given out because that always puts us in limbo. It doesn't give us that strength. So it's a constant thing that you feel, and then that's where I think I lost my innocence. That's why I say that I can never make a film as honest as Black Friday ever again, because I know the trouble I'm going to go through if I make something like that.
Yeah, as I said, Anurag, before we call Nawaz into the conversation as well, what did it cost you? What happened to you? And this
I think it cost-
understanding you have of
it-
human
it
nature.
cost me
Be a
everything.
little honest with us today.
No, it cost me everything. Like, I was that village boy. I was literally a village boy who married the first girl he kissed. So, and I married her because she was the only girl who wanted to marry me. you know, and from there, in that one process of those 7 years, started drinking, became an alcoholic, losing confidence, losing my marriage, having a child, losing my friends, everybody telling me what I must do. No smoking came from actually there, where everybody knew what I must do better than what I was doing, or what I thought was. Everybody would say that, ऐसी film क्यों बनाते हो? उसको देखो कितनी अच्छी film बना रहा है. Sometimes I had a pressure. My closest friend was Imtiaz. He bought his first car. Suddenly the pressure came on to me, why can't you buy a car? All those things were happening around me. I was writing the shittiest films in the world. If you go on my IMDb, you won't believe the kind of films I've written dialogues for, because I had to bring home the money. I lost everything in those 7 years. I completely almost lost no smoking came out of that complete phase of, I don't know what to say to the world where I'm not being allowed to say, which is why the film was so cryptic. So I lost a lot. I discovered a whole new world, and I think somewhere everything happens for the better, because I wouldn't be the same if I didn't go through that. There's a complete loss of innocence. And I became an alcoholic, I became a drug addict, I don't know. I discovered the internet, I started blogging, I let it out on the whole world, which changed cinema. And then my blog changed cinema. My blog is where I found everybody from Chaitanya Tamhane to Vasan Bala to Anand Gandhi to everybody who matters in cinema today. I found all of them on that blog. So, somewhere that in that anger, starting that blog mattered. So, but the blog I had already started. Coming on board mattered. So all those things happened. There's a lot of price we pay for it, and then eventually I think it's not that it's over. We still fight. Like in the sense, I have all sorts of tracks troubles after Urta Punjab fight. So it doesn't get over.
There's a quick story I'd like to share with you that Anurag's brother, of course, is a very successful producer who produced Dabang.
And directed, yeah.
And directed it, of course. And Anurag was talking to us about how his brother wrote under his name and sold scripts under Anurag's name, which Anurag wasn't writing. But he said, "Tu chup rahe, tere ko 10,000 mil jayega har mahina." So he clearly has a better marketing and real mind than you, Anurag. Just quickly again, we've spoken about some of the personal experiences and circumstances that have created your understanding, but also the themes that you pick, Anurag, which is of violence, which is of the hinterland India that mostly we never see in cinema.
When every time everybody sees my film, they say, you're so violent. The fact is, till date, I see blood, I faint. Nobody knows that. I get so uncomfortable with violence. If most of my films, barring Wasipur, violence has always been off screen. But there's Panch, Black Friday to Raman Raghav, the act of violence is never on screen. And that's my whole struggle with violence, which I want to put it out there, that it's in your head. You have always seen violence in my movies, which is not on screen. It's always off screen. Not once it's been on screen. And the only film where violence was on screen was Wasipur. And the reason why we were doing that was because we wanted to not make it like that. So if you see in Wasipur, what we were experimenting with, we were doing long single takes. Whether it's Nawaz escaping or whether it's Manoj Bajpayee stabbing. And I said, I had to sit down with my action director. I said, I don't want to cut to a stab going and blood coming out. I want to do long single takes to people wanting it to get over, and I don't want it to get over. Whether it's Nawaz beheading the guy. So in Wasipur, we are trying it the other way, where we'll do long single takes and not cut it down. So violence has been something that I've been dealing with for a long time. So when people say that, I love this violence, I'm going to put it out there, I sometimes feel people don't know what they're talking about. Because a lot of times I genuinely have believed all these years, when you put very uncomfortable violence on screen, it puts people off violence. It makes you so uncomfortable. When you go off violence, it actually takes it out of you. But when you see that glamorous violence, that thing where people fly in the sky, and then that's what kids imitate and end up dying when they see Shaktiman and when they see other things. The moment you see that glamorous violence on screen, you want to feel like a hero and you want to go out and be like that. And that's something that nobody deals with. Nobody wants to talk about it. And because it's easy to watch and they're not uncomfortable, so they accept it. But the uncomfortable violence, which I think sometimes should be thrust in the people's faces. I always feel when people, I'm like so anti-war in my life. I say every time people talk about war, I said they should go and fight the war. Like I'm saying, I'll come with you. You want to talk about war? Let's go fight the war. No, let's send our cousins and our families to fight the war for us. I'm saying, war is that great. Let's go do that. But that's not. It's like we are like all army of people who suddenly have this social network and we can say anything and we talk about things that, it's like, and suddenly there's this sense of patriotism that has come in everyone. And I have to seriously sit there and ask, tell me one thing you have done for the country, man. I'll tell you 50,000 things I would go out and do, but you tell me one thing. But it's just this thing that, and that bothers me, and that's why I want to put films out there. That's why I want to go out and question things. And yes, you'll be like put on a stake and you'll be questioned and things you'll go through. But then it's like my dad used to say, कि आपको फैजाबाद से बनारस जाना है तो शाहगंज होके जाना पड़ता. But you have to deal with the consequences, You have to deal with the consequences of the road you choose to walk on.
That's well put. Before, there's a lot more, and we'll as time permits, keep exploring more about Anurag's psychoscape and landscape. But before that, I'd like to invite somebody else who's very much a part of the enterprise that Anurag has put his entire life force behind, which is to give voice to people who do not fit the bill of what is comfortable and glamorous and mainstream. And yet he's had so much force that he has made it the mainstream. He has brought the corners, the angularities, the India that we do not connect with firmly into our faces. And for doing that, he has had incredible talent. He's picked up people that nobody else would touch, and he's turned them into international stars. And it has been a symbiotic process of trust and faith in those who want to do things in their own way. So ladies and gentlemen, today we are very, very, very pleased to have amongst us one of the most accomplished actors in modern India, Nawazuddin.
जहर की नाली छोड़ दे इतना भी जो कर न सके तो फिर काहे का गुदा तेरी खाल में रहेंगे कीड़े तू सच्चा बेहुदा जिसकी किस्मत में है हारी शर्तें जिसकी नीयत लगी फफूंद की परतें तेरा खून है 100 में 90 काला तूने नाखूनों से फोड़ा छाला छाला तू सच्चा बेहुदा
लगे रहो भगवान का सीसीटीवी कैमरा हूं मैं
Actually, I was wrong. Nawazuddin is not an actor, he's a shapeshifter. You just don't know who he is. He's a man who melts into the crowd, man who melts into the roles that he plays. And it's a real privilege to meet the real man today and to get to know something about him. Anurag, who really knows Nawaz possibly better than anybody else, has offered to do the interviewing and conversation with Nawaz because he says he knows which buttons to press. So, so you're going to watch a director bring not the actor out, but the man out for you. Over to you, Anurag.
No, I'll start with my story of how I met him the first time. You know, Rajpal Yadav, everybody knows, is an actor. And Rajpal Yadav was struggling in Bombay. And there was a time he was like very disappointed with the city and he wanted to leave the city. And this is back in 96, 97. So somebody told me and I said, oh yeah, I'll talk to him because I was working with Mr. Ram Gopal Verma. And Satya had not yet come out. I was writing Satya. And we were writing another film called Shul. And I said, okay, fine. And I asked Rajpal to meet me at the Andheri station. We didn't have mobile phones at that time. We had pagers. So we decided the platform number 1 on Andheri station to meet Rajpal Yadav. And Rajpal Yadav came and there were 3 friends with him. And Nawaz was one of the friends. And he was the quietest friend. He did not say a word. So I wanted to dissuade Rajpal from leaving Bombay. And I gave him his first role in Shul, which was the role that defined his life. And Nawaz also came and auditioned for a role and he became the waiter in that film Shul. And I told him, you're such a good actor from NST, don't do this role. And Nawaz says, sir, wo ek din ka paisa milega mere ko bahut chahiye. So that's how I met Nawaz. And the kind of jobs he has held, in the sense, in the years, he's actually been a security guard, a watchman. He has sold vegetables on the streets of Bombay. He's hawked vegetables. He has done all kind of odd jobs before becoming an actor. It's been a very long journey. So, you know, and I take a lot of pride in him. I take a lot of pride in him because I feel he's one person I can do so much with. And the kind of trust he gives me is like somehow my best also comes out with him. It's a very, it's not that we can do it without each other. It just happens. There's just this trust and bond that happens and things. So आपसे पूछ रहा हूँ मैं, आप बताइए वो जर्नी के बारे में कि जब that phase before it all happened. आपकी जो जर्नी थी, आप जब बॉम्बे से आए थे, जो बहुत सारे लोग नहीं जानते, मैं बीच में इंटरप्ट करके आपको पूछता रहूँगा क्योंकि जब आप उसको कवर करने की कोशिश करोगे मैं थोड़ा सा
मैं एक्चुअली हाँ चल रहा है ना हाँ मैं 2000 में आई थिंक हाँ 2000 में बॉम्बे आया था और वही ये सोच के आया था क्योंकि थिएटर बहुत किया था दिल्ली में आए NSD पास करने के बाद स्ट्रीट प्लेस बहुत किए थे मैंने यहाँ पे 4 साल तक. उसके बाद अब चूंकि हिंदी थिएटर में इतना ज़्यादा पैसा वैसा तो है नहीं तो डिसाइड यही किया यार जब भूखा मरना है तो बम्बई में जाके मर जाते हैं. तो निकल गए तो गए वहाँ पे मैं सोच के गया था कि छोटे मोटे रोल टीवी सीरियल में मिल जाएंगे तो ज़्यादा अच्छा रहेगा. तो टीवी सीरियल में स्ट्रगल स्टार्ट किया और लेकिन उसमें शुरू में छोटे मोटे रोल मिले लेकिन उसमें भी फिर रिजेक्ट होते चले गए. इसलिए कि जब डायरेक्टर के पास जाते थे तो ये बोलते यार आपको नहीं लेंगे क्योंकि एक दिन में एपिसोड भेजना पड़ता है चैनल को. तो लेकिन हमें क्यों नहीं लोगे फिर. तो उसने कहा कि यार तुम लोगों के लिए 1.5 दिन लग जाता है. क्यों. लाइट ज़्यादा लगानी पड़ती है बेबी. तो धीरे धीरे टीवी सीरियल का जो वहाँ से भी एक तरह से जो है वो पत्ता साफ हो गया टीवी सीरियल का. तो क्या करें बहुत चलो फिल्मों में ट्राई करते हैं. तो फिल्मों में एक एक सीन ही मिला. सरफरोश में मिला. फिर वो शूल में इसीलिए गया था. शूल में वहाँ पे इनके सामने
था जब आपको सिर्फ लेबरर या ऐसे गांव वाला या काम वाला.
हाँ यार ये पतला दुबला सा दिखता है इसको वो बना दो. कुछ और बना दो, इसको सब्जी वाला बना दो, इसको ये बना दो, वो बना दो, सारे रोल ऐसे ही मिल रहे थे। तुझे तंग आ गया, मैं परेशान हो गया यार, अभी बहुत हो गया ये सब। तो फिर ब्लैक फ्राइडे आई, ब्लैक फ्राइडे में मुझे 3 सीन मिला और मैंने अपने दोस्तों को बोला जाके, और वो 5 साल हो गए थे तब तक। तो ब्लैक फ्राइडे में जब मिला मुझे तो मैंने दोस्तों से कहा कि बॉस मुझे 3 सीन मिले हैं ब्लैक फ्राइडे में, अब देखना।
But you know, I'll also tell you this is. I also don't think that I was very different from how everybody saw him, because there's a thing that happened on the sets of Black Friday. My first shooting with him, मैं पहला दिन शूट कर रहा था और हम लोग वो सीन शूट कर रहे थे where he's being interrogated, and he's a fabulous actor, and the way he was performing that scene KK के साथ, and he was talking about how it all happened that day. When we took that shot and we were changing scenes, like, you know, we had to jump to the next scene. While the changeover was happening, I stepped out, and my assistant Aparna Malhotra, who was also my co-writer on Gulal, and she came out and she suddenly just looked at me and started gushing about Nawaz. She told me, "Kitna khoobsurat aadmi hai wo." And she just started gushing about it. I said, "How beautiful is he?" And I said, "Who?" And she said, "Nawaz." I said, "Acha."
Anurag, I have to tell you, when we were cutting this film, that is the exact response that the editor and I were working on the film on Nawaz. We both said, "Kitna khoobsurat aadmi hai." And we have made a longer film on him than you, by the way, just for that.
So, and then she said, "Have you seen his eyes?" I said, "You can just literally dive into his eyes." I said, "Acha." And Nawaz was still sitting there, wo role mein tha, and he was in his chaddis, so he didn't want to come out. Because in that scene, the torture scene where he was stripped to his underwear, so he was just sitting there. And I went actually and sat down next to the camera and I just kept looking at him. And I looked at him, hit him for like 5 to 10 minutes, and I came out. I said, "This man has something else. You know, you need to just maybe look tad bit longer at him, and you'll see a world that you have not seen anywhere else." And that is the day I actually started talking to him much more. And I said, "You know, one day we'll do something together." I don't know. My films don't release. We are not in a position. We started talking. So I want to talk about it because, you know, there was a phase when we used to talk a lot, but I want him to talk about it. When Nawaz would get a lot of female attention every time he stepped out of India. In New York, in France, women, they jump on him. So when that realization hit him and the way they look at him, I want, sir, आप कुछ बात करेंगे उसके बारे में? जो आपको बाहर female attention मिलता है. और the day you started realizing that सिर्फ वो मेरे को सब्जी वाला या वॉचमैन नहीं है, मैं बहुत और कुछ भी हो सकता.
अब वो एक्चुअली क्या हुआ था कि शुरू से ये जब मैं वहाँ से शुरू किया था ना, मैंने अपने गांव से अपनी भाभी या मौसी वगैरह को बोलना शुरू किया कि मैं फिल्मों में काम करना चाहता हूँ. अरे भाई अपनी शक्ल तो देख ले. तो वहीं से शुरू हो गया था. तो हमेशा लगता था यार शक्ल में पता नहीं क्या प्रॉब्लम है, क्या है. वैसे तो अम्मी तो बोलती हैं बहुत अच्छा है यार, बहुत अच्छा दिखता है. लेकिन बाकी लोगों को पता नहीं क्या प्रॉब्लम हो रही है. तो एक्चुअली वहीं से शुरू हो गया था. फिर बाद में जब वहाँ गए, बाहर गए, तो वहाँ पता चला कि यार अपनी भी वैल्यू ऐसी नहीं.
पर नवाज, अगर आप कल अनुराग मेरे साथ ये शेयर किया था कि आपकी एक गर्लफ्रेंड थी जो मिस इंडिया थी, और अगर आप अपने आप को अभी हम इम्पोर्टेंट चीज पे जाएंगे, पहले थोड़ा मसाला लेते हैं.
हम किसी का नाम नहीं लेंगे.
हम
किसी का नाम नहीं ले रहे हैं.
हम आपको बॉलीवुड सुपरस्टार जैसे ट्रीट कर रहे हैं. पहले आपकी रोमांसेस के बारे में जानने जा रहे हैं, फिर हम महत्वपूर्ण बातें पे आएंगे. तो नहीं, पर नवाज, अगर आप थोड़ा इस पे शेयर करें. अनुराग कह रहे थे कि हमें शारीरिक वेशभूषा से इतना इंटरेस्ट है कि how people responded to you, how your girlfriend's friends responded to you. अगर आप
there's a story, there's a prejudice story that I want to talk about. ये बहुत ज़रूरी है बात करना आज की डेट में, इसलिए मैं बोल रहा हूँ. आप मुझे बाद में गाली दे देना रूम में. The thing is, you know, there's this place I was sitting in. वासेपुर शुरू नहीं हुई थी, before वासेपुर, and I knew because he used to talk to me. There's this girl he was dating, and they had broken up, and he was kind of going through his own phase. And I was sitting with this group of women, and they knew that I was doing a film, and they knew me from somewhere else. And that girl he had broken up with was a Miss India, and she was in the same circle of friends. And they had this conversation where I got very angry. And all they had to talk about for half an hour to 1 hour was about वो कैसा काला कलूटा आदमी सब्जी बेचता था, वॉचमैन था, मैंने वो लड़की से मैं उसको बोला क्या है, किस आदमी के साथ है, छोड़ दे उसको. They were doing a film together or something, you know. And the way it happened, and I was so angry. I said, you know, what are you and who are you and what are you talking about? I said, have you seen what that man can do? But that prejudice that is so deep rooted within us against the color of the skin is what a lot of actors face. A lot of actors face. We all face in this country. We don't see beyond that. Somewhere it was also that anger because of which we remember we did that song Kala Re. With Sneha we said we want to celebrate Kala Re. Kala hai na, hum log celebrate karenge. So, but you know, that thing that came out of that anger in that, after that meeting is when I had the meeting with Sneha and we wanted to do that song. And that's why I was talking to her. That, you know, that whole prejudice that a person faces all the time and it's thrown at his face and it kind of puts them down is something that I wanted to put it out there. तो मैं वही बताना चाहता हूँ, because हम लोग नहीं feel कर सकते जब आपके चेहरे पे फेंका जाता था. So आप ही बोल सकते हो, you have to tell us that आप क्या feel करते थे उस समय. इस तरह की चीज़ जब आप constantly face करते हैं, it's not about the woman or Miss India, but it's about the things that you face and we don't talk about. Like what Tanishta ने अभी recently उसके बारे में लिखा था Facebook पे. So आप, मैं चाहता हूँ उस बारे में बात करूँ.
मैं बिल्कुल स्टक हो गया एक्चुअली.
नहीं नवाज, अभी
लेकिन मेरा अब ये था कि मेरे बहुत बार ऐसे रिजेक्शन हुआ इसी चीज़ को लेके, लेकिन फिर मैंने बाद में सोच लिया था कि यार ये डिपार्टमेंट अपना नहीं है. तो थैंक गॉड उसकी वजह से ना मुझे कंसंट्रेशन और पूरा फोकस अपने काम में लगाने का एक चांस मिल गया मुझे. वो मुझे इस चीज़ का फ़ायदा हुआ. अगर शायद मैं भी, क्योंकि बहुत सारे दोस्त थे, आई थिंक मैं 35 का हो गया था जब तक कोई 34 का, तब तक मेरी कोई गर्लफ्रेंड नहीं हुई थी, है ना. मैं ट्राई बहुत किया, लेकिन मैंने बहुत ज़्यादा ट्राई किया मैंने. तो जब पता चला कि यार ये अपने बस की बात नहीं है, और वो इसलिए हुआ था क्योंकि मेरे सब दोस्तों की गर्लफ्रेंड थे. मैंने यार मेरा कुछ ऐसा कुछ चक्कर नहीं, मेरा भी होना चाहिए कुछ ना कुछ. तो एक लड़की थी, तो उसको बोला मैंने कहा पार्क में चलोगी क्या मेरे साथ. बोले हाँ चल सकती हूँ, दोस्त है तो मेरा, चल सकती हूँ. तो मैं ले गया उसको पार्क में. तो
वो सीन मैंने चुराया था.
तो पहले देखा मैंने इधर उधर कोई है तो नहीं. तो जैसे कोई आ नहीं रहा था तो मैंने उसके हाथ पे हाथ रख दिया ऐसे. उसने बोला ये क्या किया तूने. मैंने क्या हाथ पे हाथ रखा है. उसने बोला ये तो इलीगल है. और जैसे उसने इलीगल बोला, मुझे थाने पुलिस ये सब याद आने लगे. मैंने बहुत बड़ी गलती कर दी नवाज तूने.
वो सीन हमने वासेपुर में चोरी किया था.
वासेपुर में रखा.
नवाज, मैं अभी अनुराग को फिर से वापस माइक देती हूँ, पर उसके पहले बहुत लोग कहते हैं कि जो आप फिल्में में दिखाते हैं अनुराग और आप इकट्ठे, कि ये सही नहीं हो सकता है, दिस इज़ नॉट रियलिस्टिक, इट इज़ ग्लैमराइजिंग वायलेंस. आप जहाँ बड़े हुए हैं मुजफ्फरनगर के पास एक बुधाना गांव में, आप थोड़ा हमें बताएंगे कि कैसे माहौल था जब आप बड़े हो रहे थे, और अभी जब आप वापस जाते हो. ये दूसरी इंडिया की शक्ल है जो ज़्यादातर ना मीडिया में दिखती है ना सिनेमा में दिखती है. हम ज़्यादातर स्विट्ज़रलैंड को देखते हैं जब हिंदी सिनेमा देखते हैं. तो आप थोड़ा बता पाएंगे कि आप किस माहौल में बड़े हुए थे और वहाँ पे किस क्राइम और वायलेंस का कैसे असर होता है, और आप पे असर हुआ कि नहीं.
हमारे यहाँ वही है कि जैसे 3 चीज़ें बड़ी फेमस होती हैं वहाँ पे, गेहूँ, गन्ना और गन. तो जब खेती बाड़ी हो जाती है ना, तो बहुत टाइम होता है लोगों के पास बातें करने का. तो उसमें क्या करें, बहुत सारे लोगों के दिमाग में खुराफात आ जाती है कि चलो थोड़ा इसका भी इस्तेमाल करें, इसका तो कर लिया. तो इस तरह की भी चीज़ें होती हैं. तो माहौल जैसे हर गांव का होता है वैसे ही था. थोड़ा खाली टाइम बहुत होता था लोगों के पास. बट जैसे हम ग्लोरीफाइड करते हैं कि अरे गांव है तो बहुत ही अच्छी, सब सारी चीज़ें बहुत अच्छी होंगी, बट वैसा आई थिंक अभी अभी बचा नहीं वैसा, क्योंकि आई थिंक बहुत स्मार्ट और बहुत बहुत तेज भी हो गए हैं, ऐसा नहीं, मतलब हम हमें लगता है कि यार गांव के लोग बहुत इनोसेंट होते हैं, लेकिन स्मार्ट होते हैं, ऐसे नहीं। But क्या शहर के लोग नहीं, उन वहाँ के लोग भी बहुत तेज होते हैं। एक एक वो एक कॉमन सी एक सब, जैसे शहरों में मेट्रोज में होता है ना, वैसे हर जगह में बिकॉज ऑफ मे भी शायद ये नेट की वजह, इंटरनेट की वजह से सबका एक माइंडसेट एक जैसा होता चला जा रहा है। तो कहीं कोई इनोसेंसी नाम की कोई आई थिंक मुझे 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 फील होता है ऐसा, जब मैं गांव में जाता हूँ तो बहुत मुश्किल हो जाता गांव में ढूंढना भी, जो वो एक इनोसेंसी होती थी पहले, वो अभी भी मुश्किल है, गांव में ढूंढना भी मुश्किल हो गई है अभी। तो इस चीज़ का मुझे बड़ा बड़ा मतलब फील होता है।
जब आप बड़े हो रहे थे, मैं आपके चाइल्डहुड के बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ।
चाइल्डहुड में वही था, मैं हम लोग तो खैर वही हैं।
एक्टर क्यों बनना चाहते थे?
एक्टर मैंने एक्चुअली बहुत लेट बनने की सोची थी। मैंने पढ़ाई वढ़ाई कर ली थी, ग्रेजुएशन करने के बाद फिर मुझे वही ऐसा, मैंने कोई थिएटर की कल्चर या इस तरह की कल्चर कोई थी नहीं मेरे गांव में। तो बाहर निकला तो बड़ौदा में था मैं, जो केमिकल चीफ केमिस्ट था मैं वहाँ पे, एक पेट्रोकेमिकल फैक्ट्री में। तो वहाँ पे एक बंदे जो मेरा दोस्त था दूसरा, उसने मुझे बड़ौदा में एक प्ले दिखाया। तो प्ले देख के मुझे पहली बार एहसास हुआ कि यार ये, मुझे लग रहा है कि ये बहुत करेक्ट चीज़ है, क्योंकि सामने एक्टर है और इधर ऑडियंस है, जो बीच की जो केमिस्ट्री है बहुत ही फैसिनेट की उस केमिस्ट्री ने मुझे। तो मैंने उसी वक्त पे सारा अपना जॉब वॉब छोड़ के और थिएटर ज्वाइन कर लिया। लेकिन वहाँ पे भी मेरा वही उसी तरीके से स्टार्ट हुआ कि पहले चाय वाय लाना सब लोगों के लिए, बैक स्टेज करना पड़ता है पहले, सेट लगाना ये वो सारा। फिर एक डायलॉग मिला थिएटर में, फिर एक से दो मिला, तीन मिला, फिर किसी ने बताया कि दिल्ली चले जाओ, वहाँ नेशनल स्कूल ऑफ ड्रामा है, लेकिन उसके लिए 10 नाटकों की ज़रूरत पड़ेगी तुम्हें करने। तो यहाँ पे आके एक एमेचर थिएटर ग्रुप ज्वाइन किया और उसके बाद एनएसडी में एडमिशन हो गया। तो फिर वहाँ से थोड़ा सा सीरियसली मैंने लेना शुरू कर दिया था, और वहाँ से मुझे एहसास हुआ कि एक रोल में जाने का जो मज़ा आता है, जब आप कोई रोल प्ले करते हो और उसमें रहने का जो मज़ा आता है, जो एक एक दो दो महीने, क्योंकि रिहर्सल होती थी और एक एक दो दो महीने आप वैसा सा ही बन के रह रहे हो और पूरी ऑनेस्टी के साथ। क्योंकि क्या होता था कभी कभी, जैसे हम लोग रियल लाइफ में, मेरा ऐसा मानना है एक्टिंग को लेके, रियल लाइफ में जितना एक्टिंग, रियल लाइफ में एक्टिंग करते हैं हम लोग, लेकिन रोल को ऐसे करो जैसे जिंदगी, वाकई जिंदगी जी रहे हो। तो ये मुझे वहाँ जाके समझ में आया नेशनल स्कूल ऑफ ड्रामा में। फिर दो दो महीने एक ही रोल में रहने के बाद जब वो करते थे, जब स्टेज पे आके करते थे, और वो जो एहसास होता था कि दूसरे आदमी बनने का, आई थिंक वो टेस्ट जो है वो अभी तक मेरी लाइफ से गया ही नहीं। कि डिस्कवर योर सेल्फ जितना कर सकते हो, इतनी सारी चीज़ें छुपी होती हैं इंसान के अंदर। ये एक्चुअली मुझे वहीं पर रह के पता चला कि कितनी सारी चीज़ें हो सकती हैं जो खोज सकते हैं हम अपने अंदर से।
मैं कल शोमा को बता रहा था कि when she was talking about Raiders of the Dark 2, ये लिखा है ना वहाँ पे कि नवाज, एक्चुअली नवाज के अंदर उतनी डार्कनेस है नहीं, बिकॉज नवाज खुद डार्कनेस से डिस्टर्ब हो जाता है। सब लोग जब भी ये बात करते हैं, लेकिन नवाज के अंदर जो है ना, नवाज आई थिंक, मैं शोमा को बताया, नवाज बहुत बड़ा चोर है। अगर आप नवाज के साथ 10 मिनट स्पेंड करेंगे, आपको 2 साल बाद आपका कैरेक्टर पर्दे पे दिख जाएगा। The way he absorbs people, I have not seen it. Like एक एक्टर है जिसके साथ मैंने गुलाल में काम किया था, जो नवाज का रूम पार्टनर था। नवाज ने उसको कॉपी किया पर्सनल लाइफ में और लंच बॉक्स में। उसके बाद उस एक्टर को काम मिलना बंद हो गया। और वो आज तक फोन करके भाई को बोलता है कि ये क्या है, नवाज ने मेरा कॉपी कर दिया। मैं जब भी करता हूँ लोग बोलते हैं तू नवाज का लंच बॉक्स का कैरेक्टर क्यों कॉपी कर रहा है। सो देयर दिस थिंग अबाउट नवाज व्हिच आई वांट हिम टू टॉक अबाउट। तो अब क्या, हाँ मुकेश वाला जो नहीं, बट ये है, मतलब अगर मैं यहाँ से चला जाऊँ तो in 10 minutes he'll probably be imitating me and how I am on the set. So he has this innate ability. Well, when he was dealing with Raman Raghav, he was very disturbed himself. I had to constantly talk to him about not imbibing it. So in that, इतने ज़्यादा चले गए थे कैरेक्टर में, he fell ill, he got dengue, and I got a call from his wife, who was disturbed because he was mouthing the lines of the film. He was like in a very strange space, and he was constantly talking about killing people and wanting to do things and why he was doing that. And I got a very disturbing call. So he gets very disturbed with those things.
एक्चुअली क्या हुआ था, जब मुझे ये रोल दिया गया था कि रमन राघव का, तो 2 दिन, आई थिंक 2-3 दिन पहले मैं बिल्कुल एक अलोन से स्पेस में चला गया। तो बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग प्रोसेस रही वो भी उसकी, इसको तैयार करने की, रमन राघव। तो अकेला था मैं बिल्कुल, और दूर दूर तक कोई नहीं था एक छोटे से रिसोर्ट में, और मैंने लाइनें याद करनी शुरू की, और वो लाइनें इन्होंने लिखी हुई थी वो। और वो अकेला, वैसे ही अगर आम आदमी भी अकेला पढ़ता चले जाए रात में तो खुद ही से डर जाएगा वो, ऐसा, ऐसी लाइनें हैं वो। तो मैंने याद करना शुरू किया, याद किए जा रहा हूँ मैं, किए जा, क्योंकि 10 मिनट का सीन था वो, और चैलेंज ये था कि 1 टेक में ही करना, मुझे 1 टेक में ही करना है। याद कर रहा था मैं, और जैसे धीरे धीरे शाम होती जा रही है तो मेरे डायलॉग में जो मैंने याद कर ली तो भूलता जा रहा हूँ मैं, और दूसरे कुछ डर शुरू हो गया मुझे। तुमने यार ये कुछ गलत हो रहा है, कुछ, क्योंकि मुझे खुद ही एहसास होने लगा था यार कि ये जो माइंडसेट में घुसना चाह रहा था वो एक्चुअली वो कुछ बहुत ही डिस्टर्बिंग था। एक आदमी जो किलिंग इसलिए करता है कि उसको मज़ा आता है, और मुझे उस पर ट्रस्ट करना है, 100% परफेक्टली ट्रस्ट करना है उस आदमी पे, तभी, क्योंकि ये प्रोसेस जो है हमें सिखाई गई है करते हुए, मुझे बिलीव करना है, 100% बिलीव करना है कि मैं रमन राघव हूँ। तो शुरू में नहीं हो रहा था, करते करते धीरे धीरे 1-2 घंटे के बाद मुझे लगने लगा, मुझे खुद से डर लगने लगा। तो मैंने सोचा कि अब मैं यहाँ से निकल लेता हूँ, लेकिन घर नहीं जा सकता, तो बहुत दूर था, रात हो चुकी थी वहाँ पे, वहीं पे रहना पड़ता। तो वो रात मैंने कैसे गुजारी वो मैं ही जानता हूँ। और 2 दिन के बाद वापस मैं फिर सेट पे आया और किसी से बात नहीं की, लेकिन एहसास तो मुझे हो गया था कि अभी जब, क्योंकि अगर थोड़ा सा भी कहीं ना कहीं कोई डिस्टर्ब कर देता, मुझे बात करता मैं किसी से, थोड़ा कुछ चीज़ें हिल जाती हैं, डिस्टर्बेंस हो जाता है। तो उसी रॉ में आके वो सीन किया। पहली बार हो गया, बहुत अच्छा हुआ। दूसरी बार भी बहुत अच्छा हुआ, क्योंकि एक ही टेक ले रहे थे, ये 15-15 मिनट का एक ही टेक था वो। तो 2 बार होने के बाद जो तीसरी बार भी मैंने, तीसरी बार भी होगा, हाँ तीसरी बार भी होगा, यार ये तो गलत बात है। अब मेरा तो हो गया जितना होना था मेरा दिमाग से, अब धीरे धीरे मैकेनिकल होता जा रहा था वो मैं। तो आई थिंक 10 बार कराया था उन्होंने वो, लेकिन फिर भी अपने आप को कि मैकेनिकल ना हो जाऊं बिल्कुल, कि फिर भी कैसे कैसे खींच के कि वो वही फ्रेशनेस जो पहले सीन में हुई थी वो फ्रेशनेस मेंटेन रखें। तो वो बहुत, आई थिंक मेरी लाइफ का सबसे डिफिकल्ट सीन था वो पहला सीन जो था। तो इट्स अ प्रोसेस काइंड, यू नो।
तो नवाज, मैं आई विल सून रन आउट ऑफ टाइम, 2 चीज़ आपसे चाहूँगी मैं। एक तो अगर आप कुछ रोल्स हमें करके दिखाएं, क्योंकि आपकी सबसे खासियत ये है कि आप अलग अलग रोल्स, इतने अलग अलग रोल्स किए हैं, और सब में नवाजुद्दीन तो हमें दिखता नहीं है, बस रमन राघव दिखती है, और गैंग्स ऑफ वासीपुर में आपकी कैरेक्टर दिखती है। यू डन सो,
फ्रीकी अली का चड्डी में,
हाँ
फ्रीकी अली में जो,
हाँ, फ्रीकी अली में फ्रीकी अली दिखती है। तो इफ यू कैन, अगर आप थोड़े रोल्स
चड्डी
करेंगे,
वाला डायलॉग बोल देता हूँ मैं।
हाँ 2-3 बोलिए अलग अलग फिल्म से,
अच्छा, अलग-अलग
और फिर हम वापस आएंगे बातचीत पे।
पता नहीं, ब्रेथ।
अगर आप खड़ा होके स्टेज यूज करने चाहते हैं वो भी।
चड्डी 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 चड्डी, एक से बढ़कर एक चड्डी, रंग बिरंगी डिजाइनदार खुशबूदार इज्जतदार चड्डी, हर कलर है डिजाइनर, साइज और फ्लेवर की चड्डी, पार्टी वेयर चड्डी, कुमन मन से ले सुपरमैन तक सभी के लिए मिलेगी हर शेप में, नीली पीली सतरंगी और चितकबरी चड्डी, रात के राजाओं की लेडीज को वाली चड्डी, रेडियम वाली चड्डी, नाड़े वाली, बिना नाड़े वाली, इलास्टिक वाली, प्लास्टिक वाले, छोटे बच्चों के लिए स्पेशल, छोटे भी मोटो रिमोट छाप चड्डी, बड़ों के टाइगर प्रिंट चड्डी, फुल गारंटी वाली चड्डी, चाहे जितने किलो कबड्डी टूट जाएगी हड्डी नहीं पटेगी चड्डी, चड्डी 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 चड्डी, एक से बढ़कर एक चड्डी।
एक दो और रोल्स प्लीज नवाज, गैंग्स ऑफ वासेपुर से।
गैंग्स का मेरा जो फेवरेट डायलॉग था वो मैं बता देता हूँ। वो मैं अपने दोस्त के साथ बैठा हूँ एक, और चिलम मार रहे हैं हम लोग दोनों। तो मैं उसकी तरफ देख रहा हूँ ऐसे, तो पूछता है क्या देख रहा है बे? तो मैं पूछता हूँ, हम तो सोचे थे संजीव कुमार के घर में हम बच्चन पैदा हुए हैं। लेकिन जब आँख खुली तो देखा साला हम तो शशि कपूर हैं, बच्चन तो कोई और है। तो उसके बाद गला काट देता हूँ, वो दिखाया था अभी इसमें। एक मुझे एक उसका डायलॉग बहुत लाइक बदलापुर का, बदलापुर में एक सीन है जो एक बंदा खड़ा हुआ है बालकनी पे, तो हुमा कुरैशी है, वो भाग के आती है और बोलती है, मैं उसको बोलता हूँ मैं खूनी हूँ, मर्डर किया है मैंने, अगर इसको हाथ लगा दिया ना तो फिनिश कर दूंगा, गुड नाइट।
आप अभी रमन राघव के बारे में कह रहे थे, एंड इट्स सच अ डिफिकल्ट रोल, और आप इट्स जस्ट पार एक्सेलेंस नवाज जो आपने किया है। तो ये सीन जो आप कह रहे थे, या कोई भी, हमें थोड़ा डरा दीजिए रमन राघव की कोई भी सीन से।
वो एक्चुअली बहुत डिफिकल्ट स्पीच है, वो मेरे पता नहीं, काला सफेद ना, हाँ, वो वाला। मेरा बाप बचपन से मेरे को लोमड़ी बोलता था, काहे कि मेरा आंख रात में चमकते हैं ना, इसलिए। तो मैं एक स्टेशन पे जाके, बारिश बहुत हो रहा था, मैं बैठ गया जाके वहाँ पे, एक ट्रेन का टपरा था, टपरा वहाँ पे वो बैठ गया मैं। तो मैं ट्रेन का वेट कर रहा था कि कोई लास्ट ट्रेन आएगा तो जाके यार्ड में मैं सो जाएगा। तो ट्रेन तो मिला नहीं, तो मैं सोचा चले जाता है ऐसे ही भीगता हुआ। तो मैं सड़क पे चलता जा रहा था, तो मैं अपने काले पे चलता है, सफ़ेद पे पैर रख के कि मतलब आउट। तो ऐसे ही मैं अपने काले से काले पे पैर रख के चलने लगा, तो थोड़ी देर के बाद वो काला खत्म हो गया है, सामने सड़क आ गया और काला खत्म हो गया। अब भगवान ने मेरे को ऐसा ताकत दिया है, मैं जोर लगा कि सोचता है ना ऐसा, तो काला सफेद बिछता चला आता, और देखा तो मैंने काला सफेद बिछता चला गया। लेकिन सामने एक आदमी आके खड़ा हो गया, मैंने बोला कौन है तू, मेरे काले पे काहे खड़ा हो गया? वो समझा नहीं मुझे। वो बोला, मैं बोला उसको, तू जानता है मैं कौन है? मैं रमन है, रमन। वो तब भी समझा नहीं। मैं इधर पास में पत्थर पड़ा था, पत्थर उठा के उसके सर पर मारा ऐसे, वो गिर गया। गिरा भी तो उधर मेरे काले पे, अभी मैं तो उधर खड़ा नहीं रह सकता था ना। अभी फिर मैं इधर आ गया पुलिस स्टेशन में उसका रिपोर्ट लिखाने के लिए कि अभी तक वो मेरे काले पे पड़ा है। यही कोई मैं 5-7 मर्डर किया है मैं, इसलिए बताने के लिए आया है। ऐसे इस तरह का, इस तरह।
That's a very long dialogue.
वेरी वेल।
तो नवाज, जो अभी अनुराग कह रहा था कि आपके अंदर में कोई ऐसे कालापन नहीं है जो अनुराग के अंदर ज़रूर है, तो आप कहाँ से प्रेरणा लेते हैं जब आप ये कैरेक्टर्स करते हैं? वो कह रहे थे कि आप चोरी करते हैं, पर आप ऐसे कत्लों से तो नहीं
चोरी
मिले।
नहीं करते,
मेरा
पर्सनालिटी
कालापन-
चोरी करते हैं। ये लोगों की पर्सनालिटी चोरी करते हैं।
पर अगर आप एक दो और रोल्स बताए जहाँ पे आपको, जो आप पकड़ने गए थे वो आप पकड़ पाए, आपके हिसाब से आप किस शन या किस कैरेक्टर में आप वो पकड़ पाए जो आप पकड़ने निकले थे, और आप यहाँ इसका प्रेरणा कहाँ से लिया?
मेरा इवन ज़्यादातर जो कैरेक्टर हैं, जब भी मैं लाइक कोई रोल मिलता है तो मेरा हमें कभी भी फिल्मों पे दिमाग नहीं जाता। कोई हॉलीवुड की फिल्म है या कोई यूरोपियन फिल्म है, या वो कैरेक्टर में मेरा हमेशा जाता है कि मेरे आसपास के लोग जिनको मैंने ऑब्जर्व किया, क्योंकि मैं खाली बहुत बैठा हूँ अपनी लाइफ में, 12 साल, तो उसमें मैंने यही काम किया था लोगों को। तो बहुत सारे स्टॉक है मेरे दिमाग में, और बीच बीच में भी मतलब देखता रहता हूँ, चेपता रहता हूँ उन लोगों को। बट कभी कभी ऐसा होता है कि लाइक मैंने ऑब्जर्व तो कर लिया किसी कैरेक्टर, वो अगर एज इट इज़ मैं करूँगा वो मिमिक्री हो जाएगी। तो मिमिक्री मैं नहीं करना चाहता, क्योंकि उसके इमोशन की जो डेप्थ है वो आई थिंक वो कहीं ना कहीं मिस हो जाती है। ये मिमिक्री करना, और आई थिंक वो फिर किसी आदमी के थॉट में उतरना, ये बहुत ही अलग अलग चीज़ें हैं, डिपार्टमेंट है बिल्कुल इस तरह का।
ठीक है, आप कोई एक रोल पे नहीं जाएंगे जहाँ पे आपको लगा कि आप एकदम पकड़ पाया? आप
नहीं,
अभी
बहुत सारी चीज़ें, जैसे इवन मैं जब लाइक बहुत सारे कैरेक्टर होते हैं, जब आप प्रोसेस में होते हैं ना, जब रिहर्सल करते हैं, जब फिल्म की तैयारी करते हैं, तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें ऐसी होती है कि यार मैं ये कन्वे करना चाह रहा हूँ, क्योंकि एक्टर की अपनी खुद की एक पर्सनल जर्नी चल रही होती है फिल्म के दौरान। डायरेक्टर तो फिल्म तो कभी कभी होता है कि मैं जो सोच रहा हूँ, तो जो कभी कभी मुझे कन्फ्यूजन बहुत होता है इस मामले में कि मैं जो सोच रहा हूँ शायद ऐसे ही कन्वे ऑडियंस को होगा, लेकिन वो दूसरी तरीके से होता है, क्योंकि उसके साथ बाद में मैंने खुद ही उसका सॉल्यूशन निकाला कि शायद क्योंकि सिचुएशन अलग होती है, मे भी शायद इसलिए। जैसे अक्सर क्या होता है कि फिल्म में एक डायरेक्टर, एक एक्टर है, हीरो है, और उसकी गर्लफ्रेंड उसको छोड़ के भागी, ये तो सिचुएशन है, लेकिन उस पे सैड सा म्यूजिक लगा दिया तो ऑडियंस को रोना आ जाता है, लेकिन उसमें उसकी स्किल है कहाँ, उसकी स्किल का पता नहीं चलता, क्योंकि तो सिचुएशन है, उसमें गाना डाल दिया। जैसे अक्सर मुझे बहुत तकलीफ होती है इन सब चीज़ों से कि कभी कभी बोला जाता है कि यार इस एक्टर ने इस पिक्चर में बहुत बहुत बढ़िया काम किया, लेकिन जब मैं देखता हूँ जाके, लेकिन यार इसमें तो मुझे कोई खास कुछ लगा नहीं, तो सिचुएशन थी जिसकी वजह से ये अच्छा लगा, बैकग्राउंड म्यूजिक था, ये गाना था जिसकी वजह से सही लगा ये, बट इसकी स्किल्स की कैपेबिलिटीज कहीं भी नजर नहीं आई। या
वो है हमारी इंडस्ट्री में, मेनी टाइम्स वी सी ग्रेट कैरेक्टर्स एज ग्रेट परफॉर्मेंस।
व्हाट ए ग्रेट परफॉर्मेंस, ये जो इस तरह का होता है, लेकिन एक बंदे की बहुत सारे एक्टर मैंने ऐसे भी देखे जिनकी कमाल की परफॉर्मेंस वो, लेकिन किसी को नजर भी नहीं आती, क्योंकि उससे उनका एक किसी भी सैड सीक्वेंस से या किसी गाने से कोई लेना देना होता नहीं है। तो ये बहुत ही कभी कभी हम लोग बहुत ही सख्त हो जाते हैं इस चीज़ को लेके।
Anurag, I just want to come back to you because we are almost running out of time. When I asked you to come to Algebra, you were in a phase of retreat, of self-exile. What is it today that disturbs you in your interaction with India, in your interaction with society? What is making you retreat back into yourself? I just wanted to share with you, because we didn't have time, though Anurag is always very willing to be honest, that in a way that molestation, and molestation is a very polite word for the kind of violent violation that Anurag went through. That was one phase when he was in a shell. And then he's been out there fighting, staking his claim. And then when I met him a month ago, Anurag, you were holed up and in a mood of exile. Can you talk about what in the world is upsetting you now, and what is that darkness creeping up? What bothers you?
It's not the darkness, it's just the way things are today. It's everywhere. I genuinely feel that the amount of intolerance that we all have. And when I say intolerance, I'm not just talking about people who, we sitting here think are fundamentalists and people on the street. I think everybody has become intolerant. I think the intellectuals are intolerant of people's stupidities. Somebody is intolerant of something else. Everybody, the elites are intolerant, the educated is intolerant, the feminists are intolerant, everyone. This kind of a thing of where everybody has an opinion, everybody has to have an opinion. And there's one thing that I constantly feel this thing that suddenly I don't feel that you have a voice, you can't stand up for the truth. I think honesty is become a brave thing. Like when people come up to me and say, you fought for Urta Punjab, and that's really ballsy and you have courage. And I'm like, no, that's not ballsy at all. It's not at all ballsy in the sense, I loved the film. I fought for something I loved and I believed. And it doesn't take courage. You just need to stand up and speak for it. And suddenly it's become like, everything has become about that. Like, everybody comes and tells you and compliments on you on things which should be very organic and natural. And those things bother me. And this whole thing of whatever is going on, nobody wants to understand, everybody has to go with what's the general public opinion. And all those things have been bothering me, and pressure on me to make movies. So in a sense, for me, I'm just not really in exile, I've just holed up. I'm writing a lot. I've already finished writing 3-4 scripts. And I'm thinking that I should either do things, go back to UP and do it in Bhojpuri, because regional gives you more freedom, or I should go to Hollywood and do in America. Because beach ka kuch dikhta nahi hai. So I don't know, there's things I want to do that I know I won't be allowed to do. I can't deal with the Pehlaj Nilani. I cannot. But I can say on any platform that man is so stupid that I wouldn't hire him as in charge of anything. And the thing is, I have to deal with that man deciding my thing, and after all that has gone down, he's still there. And there's nothing that happens. And I know he'll be in my face for a long time, because to remove him will probably hurt a lot of egos and things. And do I really want to deal with it? I can't deal with making cinema. Cinema today is responsible for everything in this country. Cinema is the reason why people have cancer. Cinema is the reason why people smoke a lot. Cinema is the reason why animals are killed. Cinema is the reason why war is happening. Cinema is the reason for everything in this country. It's that soft target for every goddamn thing. And media needs news. They know nothing will be. Like one inconsequential man from Shiv Sena will not have any importance if he did not get up and say, send Fawad Khan back. He can't, but there are lots of people. There's a PIA Airlines that comes from India to Pakistan every day. Lots of people come from India to Pakistan, go from Pakistan to India. You know, there are a lot of people come there. You can't say this Pakistani should go back. It has to be a film person. Only then it becomes news. Only then news channels will pick it up. Everything. I'm saying, who are we? We make movies. We are not even qualified to have opinion on so many things. But we have media channels in our faces every day asking our opinions. So if you don't give an opinion, they go out and say, he waits an answer and he's a coward and this and that. When you say something, it becomes a news. It's always taken out of context. Everything is taken out of context. It's twisted around. The entire industry is fed up and scared to say a word. It's not that. We are living in a time and we are tired of being used to create news and to create a hangama. And there's one side we are facing, we are supposed to have an opinion. The other side, and no, we are not experts on things. But the thing is, like, you know, all that kind of a thing when you're constantly dealing with every day, and nobody wants to really get to the bottom of the matter. They just want it to be in news and get TRP. And who gets you TRP? Salman gets TRP. Or somebody else gets TRP. And there's this constant thing that we're dealing with. And with the kind of people who are put in charge of us, makes you see how the world sees us. We are bhands. In effect, what they're telling us, we are bhands. Our job is to entertain you. Our job is to put on anything and just perform for you. And there's nothing more than that. And that's how we feel. Because we are way down the order in list of priorities. But when it's come to using someone to create some noise, we are right up there. So no, that is something that bothers the shit out of me.
Anurag, unfortunately, we've run out of time. One big strand in Anurag's work that I would have loved to have time to explore is that his films are filled with strong women characters. And women not idealized the way, unfortunately, feminism is moving towards plastic characters. I think we've set the history back on everything that women have fought to be, which is just autonomous human beings. But Anurag's films are full of strong, manipulative, kind, courageous, but also evil women. And that's part of the authenticity of Anurag. And I think, again, the most humbling thing about even describing Anurag is what he just said, that what should be ordinary has been made extraordinary by us, because we've just become so middling in our behavior. I just wanted to end with one small anecdote about Anurag's life. I think he was in class 8 in Sindhya, or in one of these schools, when he wrote an excellent story and an essay. And his teacher said, how can you write this? Someone as young as you cannot write something, this is not genuine. And Anurag had to look up the dictionary to understand what the word genuine meant. And it has dogged him through his life, but in a way it's the leitmotif of his life, that he speaks of the world as he sees it. Indian cinema has become so divorced from Indian reality. Most of the cinema we watch does not allow us to have empathy for any other lives except for a world of Gucci bags and designer clothes and happy songs, like they were saying. But here are two men who continue to provide us windows into worlds and mindscapes and psychoscapes that we may not be able to witness otherwise, to enter those skins. And they are both extremely genuine as they do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank them for being here with us, and please continue the conversation.